Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Long Hill Report. I am Richard Morchoe, your host, and today we have with us Gus Steeves, counselor in Southbridge, writer for the Southbridge Evening News, and all-around interested person in the world situation. And we're going to defer to him to bring up the first point of discussion this afternoon.
I was thinking that yesterday it kind of really hit home how third world our medical system is.
I'm sorry?
How third world our medical system is becoming. Because we spent 11 hours in the emergency room and didn't see anybody. Got triaged and that was it. And there were people in there who were there for 13 hours, who had been there since like 7 a.m. We got there about noon. And this should not be acceptable for a first world medical system.
Well, I'm going to start off by saying something as an aside, but not really part of the discussion is, are we first world? Well, that's for later.
That's debatable.
That's my point.
Right.
But, as a third world medical system, it's interesting, you know, the spending a long time in an emergency room, spending like up in where, not a metropolis, but I don't know if they actually did it. They were closing the Mary Lane Hospital except for one or two things.
Yeah.
Now, why at this point in time is this happening?
I think it's a confluence of factors, actually. Got way too much involvement of Big Pharma. There's way too much involvement of Wall Street in buying up these hospital chains. I mean, UMass is fortunately not a for-profit, but in many cases, the way the industry is as a whole, even the nonprofits are being forced to act like they're for-profits. And you've got situations where if they actually are for-profits and are owned by these huge chains, many of them are tied into Wall Street hedge funds and things like that. And their only interest is the money. And it's getting to the point with that and the insurance companies taking so much time away from doctors' abilities to actually see patients. I mean, have you ever noticed that when you see a doctor, very often, they're spending more time on the computer, putting things into the system, and probably after they're done, spending more time coding these things for this, that, and the other thing for insurance company purposes, rather than actually doing real patient care.
Well,
and I think a lot of them really do care. I mean, I think a lot of them get into the business because they really do want to help people.
Don't they have staffs to do the coding, though?
Yeah, some of them, yeah, many of them do. But that's still a lot of the whole issue of there's so much unnecessary bureaucracy, which I think has become an issue pretty much across the board in our society. But I'll put that aside for now.
Now, I'm going to put you on the spot and say, how would you reform it? In 2 minutes, like that's going to, you know, I mean, I'm asking you for a miracle. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know, I get that. I think that a lot of the proposals for a Medicare for All system would help. I don't know how we would get a lot of these middlemen in the system out of the system in any rapid form that would allow us to convert the system back into something that actually functions for patients better than the current system does. I think we need to start looking at some of the other advanced countries in Europe and parts of Eurasia that actually do have medical systems that work.
Okay, I'm going to hit you up with something unfairly again. What do you think about the NHS in Britain?
I think it's being hijacked, from what I've read. And it's becoming, the problem is that some of those countries, Canada, Britain, are probably the two biggest ones, are also being hijacked by the neoliberal attitudes that we are spreading in this country. And I think that's part of the problem, is that they're focusing so much on the investments and the money and the people at the top making huge sums of money, that they're not putting the money into patient care.
Now, you're saying that system, well, it's being hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
I actually know somebody who was probably about, I think it was about 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
was killed by the British system. I'm not impressed with it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't say, hey, let's go out and kill her. You know, they just,
No, of course
stupid negligence.
I mean, there's stupidity and negligence in every system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they're saying, well, we're spending too much money on it, and we have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings in, a lot of that was Thatcherism.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been following the British system for a long while,
Mm-hmm.
and Thatcherism was eventually a failure,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out before because of Cunningham governments and all those governments. They were failures too. So designing the best system that you can do, that's tough. Now,
Totally.
I had a big debate with I have two male first cousins, and we had sisters. Gosh, is that a burden? Anyway, so we're kind of close. Our closest thing we are to brothers. So we Zoom once a month together, and I was saying, what we will get with Medicare for All, and I'm willing to bet my life on this, is when I was working in Boston in accounting, I never liked accounting. It was not fun. I mean, oh God, please make me grow up to be an accountant. No, nobody's going to say that.
Probably
but
not.
It was lucrative.
Uh-huh.
So, but I was on the MBTA, and I do read occasionally.
Yeah.
So I'm reading a book on the MBTA. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, there will be a delay. Oh, free at last. I'm good. I can read more, and I can read. And that was the MBTA. It was a clunky system. It would go along, be clunky, then get so clunky it had to be bailed out.
Yeah.
And then it would get a little better for a while, and that is what Medicare for All will be. And I said to them, and
Is that different than what we have now?
well, I'm getting to what my cousin said. My last thing, I said, it's going to be clunky, but most people will live. And
Right.
my cousin Chris said, that's the slogan for Medicare for All. Most will live. And so that's what your system is going to be.
That's what the current system does. Most people live. Some people die really horribly
Yeah.
because they don't get treatment, or they get they get wrong treatment, or they have overlap with medications that doctors don't know each other are prescribing, or whatever.
I can tell you some good systems, some good treatments that happened.
Oh, sure, totally.
And it's a big question. Do we want to throw what we have overboard? Well, we do, but are we absolutely convinced Medicare for All will get better? In some senses, I think it will, in that if you centralize everything, even if it's a bad idea, if you centralize the bad idea and get rid of a lot of the other bad ideas, you only have one bad idea to win.
That's a good way to look at it.
But I am willing to give the libertarian argument that outlaw all regulation as regards medicine. Outlaw absolutely everything as regards it, and see what happens then.
I think a lot more people will die.
Oh, you know what? Okay, I got a question for you.
Okay.
How many people who fought in the Civil War died?
I think the total.
All of them.
Well, eventually,
that's
yes.
that's exactly all of them.
True.
And everybody is going to die. And any system will probably get better over time. Even Medicare for All. Well, maybe not if you take the MBTA example, but but most things will get incrementally a little better, except the British National Health System.
That's because it's being hijacked.
It's
being turned around and privatized and neoliberalized.
It was being hijacked
investment.
before. And one thing about it was, it drove out the native British doctor. And that may not have been a bad thing, but then it became an actually, maybe, I don't think it's a plurality, but heavily foreign-born doctors.
There's a lot of those in our system too.
And that should,
Right now.
we should be able to educate, not that I begrudge the foreign-born doctor if they're better than an American doctor, or they add to the, the competition among doctors, fine, I'm good with that. But there should be, there's something wrong that there's this medical school situation that one of my son's friends at WPI, smartest kid he knew. He didn't really want to become a surgeon, but he had to make the money back to pay off.
Well, that's the catch right there, exactly.
Exactly.
Is that you end up driving people into specialties rather than into general family practice type jobs because they can't afford to pay for medical school anymore. The same is true of inflation in universities in general.
But the same
it's really becoming a scam.
The same is true of inflation to buy a house.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, totally.
I bring this up, and maybe I brought it up with you. The medical, what do you call it? The M&M. I had a bad M&M's Jones growing up. I was, they probably needed a detox a few times. But anyways, 5 cents when I was a little boy. 5 cents.
Yeah.
Up until probably I was over 10 anyway. 5 cents for a bag.
Okay.
I can't even afford to become pre-diabetic with what it costs now. Because it costs so much.
Yeah, they're getting
now,
expensive.
But see, the arc is, from when I was a little boy, from when Nixon closed the gold window, till today, has been constant inflation.
Oh, totally.
That causes, the part of the cause at least, that somebody cannot get a house, which is as big a problem as the doctor situation.
Yeah, I agree.
And that Fred Smith can't go to medical school and follow his dream and has to go into, hydrogen, nuclear warfare, drug,
something like
medicine
that.
or something,
Right.
something completely off the wall. And that is, one thing I would say maybe it's central banking. Because I mean, we just had the two big central bankers had to quit because
They were corrupt.
Yeah,
And they were insider traders.
But
Absolutely.
the whole thing is corrupt.
Oh, I do agree with that. And I
now,
think
okay.
part of it is because, I mean, you look at our Fed system, just like so much of our government regulatory system, it's a complete revolving door between them and the people who they're supposed to be regulating.
Next question for Gus, which
So
is
they're
one I dealt with.
Not helping the government, the people.
Next question I have for Gus, because this was something I dealt with because I was young when the Nixon closed the gold window. Should we just get rid of the Fed?
Probably.
Well, that's what Ron Paul, people like that say.
Because I don't know if they claim to be independent, but I think that they've been totally captive. They've been captive to Wall Street for a very long time.
They're independent of the executive.
Yeah,
and
that's
they're not
about it.
independent of the banks.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
So
That's what I was gonna say.
we've come to an absolute agreement that we got to do something about the medical system, and I'll expect a 100-page report for our next meeting. Next, I'm going to bring up foreign policy. And I mentioned to Gus beforehand, and I asked for his thoughts, and we're going to ask again. We are in a rivalry with China. Are we in a rivalry? Well, just as a preface, are we in a rivalry because they might be out competing us or something like that? That we have to, fight them so instead of competing? Well, anyway, we sail ships, our battleships, our aircraft carriers, in their waters, in areas where we recognize their waters, and we're saying, they claim Taiwan.
Yeah.
They claim Taiwan, but guess who else claims they claim Taiwan? We do. You can look at the State Department's page on the internet, and it says, we recognize the People's Republic of China as owning Taiwan. So why are we fighting for That's another question. But what is really crazy is now we have troops on Taiwan. I'm going to ask Dr. Steeves here, Dr. Gus Steeves, foreign policy psychologist, which we at the Long Hill Institute, we've granted you that degree.
Okay.
Is this not the definition of crazy? That you are willing to start a nuclear war over a country you claim you don't own? Over to you, doctor. Over to you, doctor.
Yeah, it is.
Can we do a better diagnosis, Doc? Really go at him. Go at him.
Give me a second. I mean, we've been playing this game with China over Taiwan for decades. It's become heated up more recently, quite frankly, because I think it's because some of the people in our government recognize that doing the same thing with the Russians would be suicidal and stupid. It's just as stupid with the Chinese.
No, it's a lot different than suicidal and stupid. It's stupid and suicidal.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
But I think a lot of it has to do with, quite frankly, I think a lot of it has to do with our corporate interests in China and the fact that some of our needs, I think it's almost like how would I say this? It's almost like we're resentful of the fact that we sent so much of our own manufacturing to China that we're taking it out on them. Despite the fact that that was profitable mostly to Wall Street, 25 years ago. And now we're looking around going, we can't do any of these things that we used to be able to do at home anymore. Some of them are in Taiwan, we're claiming, I think, like the chip manufacturing stuff that's going on down there, and as you probably are aware, there's supposedly a big global shortage of chips and all kinds of other things, actually.
I want to hit you with a question. Now, you ride along, say, Route 20 or down in South Virginia, you can see factories that have been dead for years.
Yeah, totally.
Now, they had no problem throwing those jobs and those businesses overseas.
Yep.
Why do you think they want them now? Why do you think they just wouldn't want them captive there? Why would they want to bring them home?
Well, I think that, first of all, the question I guess there is, who's they in that question?
Well, most of them.
I think a lot of the people who recognize that we need to recreate our local economy want to bring those jobs home.
Who thinks that? Wall Street.
The people in Wall Street don't, and the people who are running our government do not. I agree.
Well,
totally. They don't care about that at all.
In that situation, they're the people who count.
I agree, but they don't care about that at all.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, they would want, some of those people might be interested in bringing them home for their investments because of the fact that the Chinese economy is active enough that the Chinese are starting to demand better pay rates, among other things. I think some of these investors would be just as happy to send these jobs to Malaysia or Tanzania or the Democratic Republic of Congo.
They're already doing that.
Where they would pay about this much.
They're already doing it. My son was involved in possibly getting some, it never happened, but Vietnam is now big for that.
Yeah.
But the last thing my son went over was to Shenzhen, which is right near Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So that is still very, very active.
Oh yeah, a lot of those cities are.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at the whole issue, to kind of get back to the whole clash between us and them, I think it's mostly being ginned up. It's completely unnecessary. I think it's very interesting that the Chinese government feels that it has to add to its nuclear weapons stockpile, even though, or at least our government says that it does. Whether it actually is doing that, I'm not quite sure. And then our government demands that we drag them to the table for any negotiations with the Russians, even though the Chinese have something like 300 warheads, and the U.S. and the Russians each have somewhere in the 6,000 warhead range. I mean, it's ridiculous. And as far as any conflict between us and China, as I mentioned, it's stupid and suicidal earlier, because our ability to defend ourselves against nuclear weapons is virtually zero.
Right, exactly.
And we know that they can reach us. And even if we did have it where we could knock down, 90% of their warheads, the other 20 getting through to obliterate our cities and leave about 200 million people dead. That's not a war you win.
It's absolutely.
You can wave your flag on the ruins, but you didn't win.
So it's if you think about it, and this is something I will discuss at a later date, it really speaks to the fact that we should probably pursue a neutralist foreign policy.
I agree.
There was a long-serving French ambassador to the United States in the early part of the 20th century, and he described the United States, a defensive necessity. On the east, they have fish. On the west, they have fish. On the north, the weak neighbor. On the south, the weak neighbor. That sort of screams neutralism.
You would think.
You would think, but then you have
But
Woodrow Wilson, who, I don't know, the stupidest president sweepstakes is tough. But if Woodrow Wilson had not become president or had not started World War I, Adolf Hitler, somebody I heard say this, would have gone to his death raving in a Bavarian old soldiers' home.
Or he might have become a successful architect. But either way, he wouldn't have started World War II.
That's
right.
Well, he was in World War One.
I know.
But yeah,
I know.
and got the Iron Cross. But he would have come out, and what do I do now? And because Germany lost so bad, he had a job. Whereas if Europe had a peace of exhaustion, everybody's still standing. It would have been, you don't have to love monarchy to say that would have been better. But, actually all of Europe was essentially limited monarchy at that point anyway.
Pretty much, yeah.
A neutralist foreign policy, thank you. I'm glad I have Dr. Steeves.
I mean, I to backtrack a second though. I think some of the issues go well before Wilson. Because realistically, if you think about it, our policy has never been neutralist. Never, even from day one, it wasn't. As soon as we hit as soon as colonists landed on our shore, European colonists landed on these shores, they were targeting the Native Americans.
I do not.
And doing what we've done all along, divide and conquer.
I do not at all disagree. Remember, we sent up a delegation to Quebec during the Revolution to try to turn them. The War of 1812 was as imperialist a war as ever happened. Henry Clay, why is he considered one of the greats? We just said, hey, all we have to do is walk north. We got to conquer another country, which was, of course, imperialism. Right, of course. Hawaii, which was as dirty a deal as ever.
Well, not even before then. All of the Native American territories between here and the Pacific coast were all imperialism.
Yeah.
I mean, they were all independent cultures that we could have learned something from. And a few people did.
Well,
but our government certainly didn't.
You know what Benjamin Franklin said about the Indian cultures?
Offhand, I don't
He
remember.
said every time anyone goes for a ramble with the Indians, they never want to come back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
And you hear it from a whole bunch of other people even those who got abducted. They ended up living in the Indian culture. They ended up being adopted there, taking names, learning the languages, and then in many cases, they had to be actually stolen to come back to the white society.
Well,
because nobody wanted to live the way we were living.
Right.
Once you had an alternative that actually made sense.
Well, the Deerfield abduction, I don't know if that was a famous one.
I know who you mean, yeah. I forget what her name was.
Lived in Canada. They actually still had some sort of distant communication, but she wouldn't come back. She didn't come back.
Right.
So that's why I am the chief sachem of the Long Hill tribe.
Which is
we'll be opening our casino in no time. So, give us another item, another discussion, another bone to gnaw on for the last several minutes.
Last few minutes.
What?
I heard a whisper in the distance of human population.
Human population?
And how much of an impact does that actually have on where our future is going?
A lot. A lot, I mean, some people will come up with this, oh, well, you could fit all the people in the country in half of Rhode Island and still have 6 feet per person. But I don't know whether that's true or not. But even if it's true, how much resources do you want to extract? So what should we do? How many, should we get everybody together in Rhode Island and say, have a group assembly and say, all right, we need a fourth of you, or we need 3/4 of you to go away. Volunteers. So
Well, that is the catch. I mean, I think common sense says that the population and our resource extraction, because of our growing population, is ultimately the environmental issue we face, whether it be with climate change or overuse of farmland or just resource extraction in general. But how do we address that in a way that's fair and reasonable? Is the issue, because that you see sometimes on various websites that you'll hear some of the more far right types bring up various things that they see as population control methods, and they're usually blown out of proportion. But you can also see when somebody says a few things when some people say that a few things that are kind of stupid and taken out of context, you can see why some people believe that. And when I don't know if anybody has a good answer to that. We know there's an issue. Nobody is sane would say, oh, let's just randomly kill a whole bunch of people. The problem is, if we don't do something sane and rational and consciously think about where we're going and where we want the population and the consumption levels to be by 2100, we would have to start now to do something that would make any sense. Then if we're not careful, we end up turning into a situation where the conflicts that we're already starting to see, tying back to the whole China-Taiwan thing, turn into massive population destruction and resource destruction and city destruction and environment destruction that go far beyond anything we ever imagined we could benefit from. And we wouldn't benefit from.
To respond, I think you have put the situation well. There's a couple of things I don't necessarily not agree with you with, but you came up with the we thing, which I'm not for, because there's no we. There is no we.
That's the problem. There has to be a we.
There isn't.
That's the problem.
First of all, we're not going to have that meeting down in Rhode Island. We're all together and say, hands, how about this solution? That's not.
I agree with you.
And it's not. And we just saw. We've seen in Europe, all their green stuff has failed. It's not failed completely, but it's, the wind dropped. And we're, of course, screaming about Putin. He's doing something maybe not completely sensible, but more sensible than what we want. We want to sell Europe the gas by bringing it across the Atlantic. Which is stupid. Which is really stupid. So, but, you've heard, I heard as a young boy, and I never looked it really up, that a dilemma is a question without a real answer.
It is.
This is a dilemma. We're not going to solve it other than probably war, rape, plunder, and pillage. Because, you know, that maybe.
I hope that's not true.
Well,
but
now, you know
you're
what the
it's highly likely that it is true.
there is an answer. Singapore is the answer. They say, oh, Singapore, but that's the dumbest thing. Well, maybe it is. But Singapore has a declining population. Really successful cities, all too often, are sinks of population.
Right.
And we see the time is by, and I really very sincerely want to thank Gus for our spirited and very good discussion.
No, thank you for having me
And
on again.
you please visit us at the Long Hill Report and watch the video, tell your friends about it, and if you didn't like it, tell your enemies. Thank you very much.